Welcome to Daddy Issues. Conversations with Dads. A podcast from Fathers and Families Center of Indianapolis, Indiana. Hey, welcome in everyone. Welcome to Daddy Issues. I am Jason Acquisto, and with me as always is the president of Fathers and Families Center of Indianapolis, Larry Smith. How you doing, Larry?
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Larry,
Yeah.
you're busy, I know, doing lots of things, lots of exciting stuff happening.
I am, and it's good stuff.
And we'd like to welcome this time around, our guest is Joe Garrison. Joe is not only a former youth pastor, youth director, but also an expert in church communications and in marketing in general, as the owner and operator of Moonflower Marketing, moonflowermarketing.com. Joe was my son's youth director just before his confirmation age, but several years as a youth pastor, and then also, it might be noted, is the father of two young, amazing girls. So he's seen it from various perspectives, and we think will add a lot to this conversation. So Joe, welcome to Daddy Issues, and how are things going?
Yeah, man, I'm alive. Been a couple weeks, but I am here and kicking. So that's it's good.
We always, as is tradition, start off with a couple of dad jokes. So I've got a couple that are ready to roll here. I don't know if you heard about this. This is actually from the Indianapolis Star. This really happened. Helvetica walked into a bar. Bartender says, "Get out. We don't serve your type."
Got it.
Way forward. Okay. All right. Yeah, you got one, Larry?
Yeah. So there was a contest of puns, right? And so I thought I couldn't miss. I submitted 10 puns. There's no way I could lose this.
Yeah.
Sadly, no pun intended.
Boy.
Wow, that's I'm just a gold star, man. Yours is better than mine. Joe, any comments? You want to dip out of here?
Yeah, well, gotta go.
Okay, all right, thanks for being here. God, yeah, the sad part is that I really kind of thought that was going to be a good one. So,
Yeah.
okay, so the topic this episode is raising our children in faith. And this is a topic that we've had on our radar for some time as a part of Daddy Issues. Raising our children with religious beliefs and our own beliefs being explained, being understood, and us giving them also the chance to make their own way and to find their own beliefs or make the beliefs we've given them their own. It's also a world that we live in now where we take nothing for granted, but we want to equip them with tools, right? Larry, I tried to set it up as best I could. Is that kind of what you were thinking of this topic? That's the way I see it, is that you want to not...
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Right
we don't want to prescribe and indoctrinate and say this is it, but you also want to say, hey, this is where I'm coming from, your mother and I, and whoever the parental unit is there, but also to say, here's the facts. Now make it your own.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Easy, huh?
Cool.
Joe, how easy is that?
Super easy. I've got this all figured out. So thanks for having me on today. No, I was kind of thinking about it coming on. You asked me a couple weeks ago about doing this, and I was just thinking about how much my own thinking on this is adapted from when I was leading youth group and had a baby and the infant stage. You think but you have no idea,
right?
And dealing with a few hundred teens coming through our youth group throughout any individual year, dealing with parents, like how much I've kind of transitioned in my thinking about this. So it's kind of one of those things where none of us is totally right, but we're doing the best we can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like we got to let ourselves off the hook with that because, so full disclosure, Joe, a big church, a big youth group, suburban Indianapolis, actually, Lawrence and Castleton area. And so a mainstream church, a lot of people, a very active group of kids. And I just remember thinking, man, I'm glad I didn't become a youth director, because that would have been the coolest job ever if you'd asked 13-year-old me. But how much pressure did you feel as you were the professional youth director for these kids?
Enough pressure that I quit,
Mm,
to put it bluntly. I mean, our church, our denomination, Christianity as a whole, over the last decade has been going through a lot of changes, soul searching, politics, identity, things like that. And, I think when we were leading that youth group, when you have, I mean, I think we had about 300 kids that would come through the youth group throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
Towards the end, 100-ish that were pretty consistent every week. The pressure to teach kids what's right individually assessed by every single parent in that group
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is there's a wild amount of pressure on that.
Mm-hmm.
And being at that point I was 30 when I left, so I started when I was like 26, so maybe I was 31 when I left. I don't remember. I was about 5 years. I'm just figuring it out for myself, what's my own theology, what's
Mm-hmm.
my you know philosophy of ministry, what do I think we should be teaching kids, those kind of things. A lot of it you're kind of growing up on the
Mm-hmm.
job there. And um the pressure to impart the theology or whatever to these kids that each parent wants you to
Mm-hmm.
led to a lot of meetings with a lot of parents that were like, some were really conservative, some were really progressive, some, a lot of them were in the middle, just figuring it out themselves, and all of them had opinions.
Yeah,
uh it gets interesting pretty fast.
I can imagine. And I know that it's on the job. You're also going through a lot of that too. And, when I was a teenager, my youth director that I looked up to be a mentor, this guy was just out of seminary. I mean,
Mm.
he needed some
mm,
grace to be 24 years old or whatever, like you, mid 20s. It's a lot to put a person into to say, okay, teach him the truth. I just wonder if you were able to kind of find a middle ground there where you're like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to love these kids and show them grace and show them, what I believe through the way I live and not try to do too much. That old sports cliche.
Yeah, I mean, my own theology in that time was probably, we've talked about this, you and I have,
Yeah.
more conservative than it is now, probably. But,
Yeah.
I think we realized after a couple of years, I think when things really started to take off, that like, if we really provide a environment, a system, within which parents, youth, and volunteers all feel very heard and cared about,
Mm,
uh, then the rest of it kind of takes a little bit of a back seat. I mean, you're still
mm,
teaching things and still doing your best to get it right, but I think
right.
that's where we really hit that sweet spot. And I mean, I left that job almost 10 years ago, and I'm going to one of those kids' weddings on Saturday.
mm,
Mm,
So, and I officiated a wedding a year and a half ago of one of them, and so I think it's kind of those things like down the road now, like hindsight's 2020. I'm like, okay, like the ones that I really, at least as far as my assessment goes, nailed it pretty well in terms
hmm.
of okay, man, I love you, I care about you, and I'm here for you no matter what. Those are the ones that are still inviting us to their weddings and
That's
sending us
pretty
their
cool.
Christmas mail and things like that. I think that's,
That's amazing.
I'm curious. So when you finally decided to leave, I want to ask this very carefully. Did you feel like it was simply time? God was leading you to move on. Did you feel pushed out? Did you feel that you were running away? Was it a mix of things?
oh man, I'd probably say yes to all of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
To be just
Yeah.
super clear about it. No, there were elements of pushing. There were elements of it feels time. I'll tell you this. When I went into that job, I told my wife, because I experienced this before growing up in church, that the point where I realized that I'm not doing it for the right reasons is the point where I have to quit.
Mm,
Mm,
Uh, and I did. I quit with no job prospects at all, but unemployed for a while after that, um, because I'd realized for a lot of reasons, I was doing it for the wrong reason. And I didn't want to hurt kids in the way that I think I'd seen other people hurt kids by just continuing to do ministry because it's their job. So some of it was that. In about a year and a half before I left, I had a massive anxiety attack. I passed out on the altar of the church, in an empty sanctuary, rolled myself down the steps, crawled to a pew and called my wife.
Mm.
I probably should have called an ambulance. But I called my wife and then walked back over to my office and ended up going to the hospital and spent a night hooked up to all the wires, trying to figure out what was going on. Did I have a heart attack? Am I having a stroke? I ruled all that out, brain scans, the whole deal, and said, well,
Mm.
I think you just had a really big anxiety attack.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when was the beginning of the end, realizing that like there's only so much one person can put into that many relationships and that kind of just chaos that happens within youth ministry and within church ministry and the political environment and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot going on there, but there's a little bit of everything in terms of why I left, but there was a couple of those were big ones.
Curious as to how that experience informs how you're rearing your own children.
Yeah, I'm definitely less like hands-on about it, I guess, with my kids. We go to church. They know that's what we do. We're involved in church. We're very intentional about the service and community service aspect of church, taking care of people that have needs. You know, our kids, our church is very into, food drives and food banks, works with gleaners. Our kids now, all the kids on the court do or lunch stands, and they raise their money for gleaners. Instead of their own piggy banks usually, or they do a split, they'll like call it a 50-50. But we like really focus on that stuff more, like the caring about people and the loving people and being a part of a community more than I think I would have when I first had my daughter, where I would have probably been more into like okay, here's the rigid ideas of theology and like biblical learning and things like that. I think as I've grown to realize like it is that like caring and loving and support that then I think will keep them more rooted. And so far it seems to be doing okay. And my daughter came up to my 8-year-old came up to my wife and was like, I've got this like Jesus calling book. Can we start reading this? I want to get closer to God. And it's like, cool, because we didn't really push you into that. Like you're 8 and you're asking about it. And so I'm down with that.
Yeah. That's a great way to do it. And I remember certain times as my son was growing up that I felt like I should give him some of the words. And here's now about this, right? And give some points of theology. And well, now this is how we do this. And looking back, I just believe that so much of what he is and still is becoming, of course, we all are spiritually, is because of the broad strokes and not the minutia of here's why we believe this. Here's this. Now, can you name all the things? And the big gestures, the broad strokes, the why of basically the love God, love people axiom, which you're like, okay, if nothing else,
Yeah.
if I fail at all the other stuff in forming my kid, if they get that out of it and can grow up and say, well, my parents brought me up as a Christian because they loved God and believed that the way they show that is by serving other people, then I'm good, right?
Say we take that across the board, even in school. Like, hey, did you, I don't really care as much grades as I do how you treat people and how you're acting and how as long as you're putting in the effort and you're kind and nice to people and you're caring, then I don't care what your grades are. Like my kids have good grades, that's great. At some point, if they don't, whatever. Were you nice to your teacher? Did you care about your, other students? Like, okay, cool. Like we'll figure out the grades thing if we have to. But
that's a good analogy.
I think that's kind of part of it for us is like being a lot of that. I mean, a lot of that's my wife's influence too. Just like being consistent across the board. Like it's at church, it's at school, and it kind of follows, I guess, the same framework, if you will.
You know a little bit about framework. Yeah. So this is Daddy Issues, and we'll be right back.
Temp check. What kind of summer are we having this year? A family road trip summer? A beach bum summer? Or a wake me up when the sun sets summer? With Instacart, choose your own adventure and skip the shopping side quests. Where available, you can get ice cream delivered to your hotel, sunscreen to the pool, or cold brew to your bed. Well, door, in as fast as 30 minutes. Wherever you find yourself this summer, you can get the goods. Download Instacart for free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum $10 per order. Excludes restaurants. Additional terms and fees apply.
They say opposites attract. That's why the Sleep Number Smart Bed is the best bed for couples. You can each choose what's right for you, whenever you like. You like a bed that feels firm, but they want soft? Sleep Number does that. You want to sleep cooler, while they like to feel warm. Sleep Number does that too. Sleep Number Smart Beds also learn how you sleep and provide you with personalized insights to help you sleep even better. You have to feel it to believe it. Find the bed that's for both of you, only at a Sleep Number store. 9 out of 10 couples say they sleep better on a Sleep Number Smart Bed. Time to catch some Z's. J.D. Power ranks Sleep Number number 1 in customer satisfaction with mattresses purchased in-store. And now during Sleep Number's biggest sale of the year, save 50% on the Sleep Number Limited Edition Smart Bed, plus special financing for a limited time. For J.D. Power 2023 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Only at a Sleep Number store or sleepnumber.com. See store for details.
And now back to daddy issues. Larry, what was your experience growing up, and from a young age, were you taken to church every time the doors were open kind of thing, expected to be there, learn the books of the Bible?
No question about it. Very, very conservative upbringing. I grew up in what's called the Free Will Baptist Church. And, we used to joke when I was a kid that, we had a drug problem, right? We were drugged to church every time the doors
Yeah.
were open. And that was out of 7 days, we were in church for at least 4.
Yeah.
Right. On Sunday, started with Sunday school, and then morning service, and then afternoon service, and then sometimes late service. There was youth choir rehearsal, Wednesday night Bible study, and so on. And then, this program, that program. So absolutely, very, very much. Certainly, we would have identified as evangelical Christian before that term became so politicized, right? But essentially that's what it was. If you just sort of look at the traditional definition of what an evangelical Christian is, and then as Jason knows, Joe, I was a teenage dad. I became a dad just shy of 17 years old. So my oldest is now 37. She and her husband will celebrate 10 years of marriage this year. 4-year-old grandson, almost 3-year-old granddaughter, probably largely because I acted obviously in a way that was contrary to the way I was reared. I was very, very strict with her, growing up, which she actually, interestingly enough, thanks me now. She wasn't very happy about it then, but thanks me now. And then I'm married, unfortunately, divorced with my 2 teens. And, my former wife and I sent them through a school, you probably heard of the Oaks Academy, from pre-K all the way through 8th grade. We absolutely wanted to indoctrinate them, if you will, in the positive sense. We would think in the positive sense of the word, in terms of what we believe and so on. Interestingly enough, all 3 of my kids, so a 37-year-old, 19-year-old, my son will be 17 in July, all of them are easily more progressive than I am. Easily. Just to give one example, and I'll be quiet. So, now 40% of the people are going to like what I have to say. 40% are going to hate it, and then those percentages are going to go down from there. But I am a pro-life evangelical Christian. Strongly believe in the life position. However, I also recognize that as my own personal religious belief. And so I was not in favor of overturning Roe v. Wade. I think that is a decision between a woman, her doctor, and her God. And so, the folks who are really, really hardcore pro-life will say, you're not really pro-life, right? And then on the pro-choice side, well, yeah, you kind of pretend you're pro-choice, but not really, because you say, so you got to get stuck in all the political stuff. But I could assure you that none of my kids would have my same position on that issue.
That's good, though, isn't it? Because you've given them guardrails to form their own beliefs and support to say, okay, listen, hey, be a good person. Here's the framework, and within that, you're not going to tell them what they have to believe, right? I mean, I believe that's kind of the difficulty that we're talking
Well,
about.
actually, I did. I mean, so my oldest, absolutely. The two younger ones, it's funny. I never. It's not something that I think I was even really conscious of, but if I look back in retrospect, I did. However, that's also a learning point for me, because having gone through that experience now with three, I now recognize that they will end up believing what they believe. You cannot,
Sure.
just sort of cut a hole in their head and pour it in, right? They are going to believe whatever
But
they're going
you
to
thought
believe.
when you were a teenage dad, you thought maybe that you could.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
There's no
Yeah.
question. Or even when I was an older dad, but it just doesn't work that way. And yeah, I don't think it was ever, well, with my older daughter, maybe a little bit coercive, but with the younger two, again, it was just something that their mom and I just sort of took for granted, right? It was never, I don't, and that would be an interesting question to ask them, but I don't really think it was coercive. It was just kind of the mix in which they were reared at. They got the same message at home, at church, at school. So it's not even something that really consciously thought about, really. It was just assumed. It was kind of like by osmosis.
Yeah, by osmosis. So Joe, you and Courtney on the same page as far as like what you want to put in and how you want to present that. As far as, well, it looks, as we raise the girls, or she kind of evolved in the same way that you have in terms of taking a measured approach.
Yeah, I mean, like most things, she was ahead of me on that. I mean, I was definitely, I was just raised more strict, and I think that kind of came out probably some of my theological positions, and I think as a young parent, as I probably would have done things, but she was raised different. I mean, just has, I think, her parents were less imposing, though, church every week, that kind of stuff. Um, Also, being a speech pathologist, she has a lot of like early childhood psychology and things like that kind of come along with like just understanding better how to like handle kids. Being
Right.
an elementary school speech pathologist, I think, you're, at least for the age my kids are now, she's got more like professional expertise and just understanding like how that works. So yeah, a lot of it like just kind of looking at like how she's doing things, and she was definitely ahead of me on um how we're going to raise the kids and how we're going to do that kind of stuff. And it was definitely a two-way street. We, we're open to it and talking about it and that kind of stuff. But, she definitely led the way on that.
Well, knowing her personally as I do, this is absolutely no surprise. So it's kind of a loaded question. See if you tell the truth.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
I mean, what's crazy is the way our kids' minds develop, and when they start to absorb, and when they start to bounce out questions to be like, so, what's crazy is how multicultural, and there are so many religious beliefs represented even on my own cul-de-sac, much less in my kids' high school, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's extremely healthy, and I'm grateful for that. And I think that I've given the right message to be like, you respect everyone's beliefs, and ours are not the necessarily, this is what I believe. This is the way I practice my belief, your mother and I and our family. But that doesn't mean that that's better. That's not the national religion or anything. It's not better than Muslims, Buddhists, Sikhs, Catholics, agnostics, or anyone else that you might encounter. So are those questions coming up with the girls at all?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely, their school is like in Lawrence Township, they have kind of like magnet schools. So there's just like world studies. There's another one that's like communications, STEM, and they all have a little bit of everything, but like there's just kind of world studies. So they definitely like have a focus on learning things that are in different cultures. And my youngest specifically loves learning about other cultures, like Greek gods and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of always been our thing, is like, I mean, kind of like Larry said with the pro-life thing, like we can believe what we believe, but it's not our job to force it on anybody else. Or so that kind of comes down to our kids as well. Like, even in our own family, parents, grandparents, uncles, stuff like that, there's different kind of like flavors of Christianity. And we go, okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
that might be what they believe. That's not necessarily what we believe,
Mm-hmm.
but kind of let them live in that tension of like, well,
Yeah.
grandma said this, and but my other grandma said that. And then, but mom and dad, we keep talking about this. And it's like, well, let's just talk about that then. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think?
Yeah.
And giving them a little more like, autonomy, within some like boundaries, I suppose, but just kind of like wrestling with like even just what they see in our own family sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. You're listening to Daddy Issues. We'll be right back after a short break.
Okay, it's time to commit. 2024 is the year for prioritizing yourself. Begin your new smile journey with Byte, and you could start seeing results in just 2 to 3 weeks. Just order your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95 at Byte.com. Byte clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces. Plus, they offer financing options, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA, FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
Have you ever covered a carpet stain with a rug, ignored a leaky faucet, pretended your half-painted living room is supposed to look like that? Well, you're not alone. We've all got unfinished home projects. But there's an easier way. Thumbtack is the app that makes it easier to care for your home. Pull out your phone and in just a few taps, search, chat, and book highly rated pros right in your neighborhood. Download Thumbtack and start caring for your home the easier way.
And now, let's get back to Daddy Issues. Larry, do you have a bunch of different flavors of Christianity mixed in, different sides of the family?
Not really, not in my family. If you both according to George Barna, Barna Research, and then according to the Pew Forum on Religion, African Americans are the most devoutly religious group of people on average, right? Not everything is true of all in the country. The church has played such a seminal role spiritually, religiously, all the way through the civil rights movement and all that. So there are some variations, but it's almost like we have people who are Christian and people who are not, right? And those who are Christian sort of believe the same thing, and then there are those who are like, I don't have any time for church. I do want to say the point about respect for everyone's religious beliefs, and or even if they're atheists and so on, is crucially important to me. But that is also one of my biggest sources of concern about my kids. And again, they're just loaned to us. It's their life. So I want them to have a genuine, sincere respect for what people believe. At the same time, for me, I adhere to what the Bible says, right? You want to go to heaven, you believe in Jesus Christ. And so I've gotten concerned over the years about that. Now, I think today, 2 of the 3, I'm very, very certain that we at least agree on that. One, and I'm not sure, one kind of likes to get under my skin a little bit, so I'm not quite sure. I think this one has the same belief, but I can't. I'm not quite as sure. But for me, that's kind of the balance. I mean, respect everyone. Certainly, don't argue, fight about religion. We know what that leads to historically, not only in this country but in others. But at the same time, that core belief that Jesus is who he claimed to be and who the Bible claims he is, that continues to be extremely important to me.
Yeah, for sure. But it's hard to sit in that tension, like you said, to be like, and especially in 2024, when the word evangelical, like you referenced earlier, it's become kind of it's not what it used to mean. It didn't used to be inflammatory, and it didn't used to have the connotation that it has now. And other words, other ideas of who Christians are in culture. It's become so quickly it has become a different thing now. So I noticed my son will refer to, I was just thinking about this the other day. He said something about, oh, is that a Christian school or something like that? And I'm like,
Christ
yeah,
centered. Yeah.
yeah, well, and I'm
There's a
like,
distinction.
yeah, there
Yeah.
is, right. And I'm like, well, that's a Jesuit school, which is a type of a Catholic,
Mhm.
and so and so and so. So I mean, those kind of things are important. Oh, and he was asking about a super conservative school that he was just learning about. I don't want to use any names, but Bob Jones University. Um, super,
Nice
super
for our
well
dad.
known for being oppressively
Yeah, I think it's fair to say.
strict
That's fair to
in the
say.
name of Christianity. And so he's like, can you believe they only allowed interracial dating at some, whatever date, like last year or something, whatever absurdity. So I said, yeah, that's another one of those that is wearing that name that is doing no favors to the name Christianity, calling themselves a Christian school. So those things come up, and I find those to be really better talking points than say the fine points of doctrine,
Mhm.
Mhm.
because those, you know, I feel like the big stuff is what we owe them. The little stuff you can fill in, and if you fall into this, edge over here, maybe there's a Venn diagram where the important stuff we all intersect on. Yeah, I was raised in a Southern Baptist church, and that's absolutely far from my own belief now.
Mhm.
It's a flavor. That's why the
Mhm.
Baskin Robbins has 31 kinds of ice cream, because for the most part, those are different degrees of the same belief system. But
It's gotten hard with
anyway,
all the, it's become a litmus test, Christianity. Do you believe this? Do you believe that? Are you,
yeah,
how do you feel about gay people? What's your, pro-life stance? What's your,
right.
and I worry that like as our kids grow up, it'll just keep getting more that way. I mean, it, was some when I was a kid, but not like it is now. Like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, culturally and politically, it's just become, I mean, the lines between politics and Christianity, at least
Mhm.
from the outside looking in, seem to be a straight line.
Mhm.
um,
Should be,
and
right.
I think that just makes it so hard for kids because even just the idea of faith or Jesus is like, well, sounds like if I believe in that guy, then I have to like check all these boxes. But I'm not sure
Yeah.
about these 27 political boxes over here, but like, so, well, just shove that to the side for a minute and, start from the source. And there's really not, even in churches, sometimes there's just really not an option to do that because so much of it is come down to the check boxes.
Mhm.
It's hard because the check boxes are all some people seem to care about. And
Mhm. Yeah.
when you want to visit a church, what's the first thing you're going to look at? What we believe on their website. And then you're
Mhm.
like, okay, gay people. And then you're like, okay, what about
Right.
this? Abortion. And you're looking for it
Yeah.
because you want to find like-minded people. But it used to be just enough to be like, well, they love the Lord and we're going to go, sing our hymns with them in church. And in some ways, I'm glad it's not as simple as that, but it sure is hard now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's I mean, I think Joe made this point earlier, it's evolving, and we'll see where it ends up, that we're in this, season now. We'll see, where it goes. I mean, my church, Eastern Star, large, right? I mean, thousands and thousands of people. And historically, it was a missionary Baptist church, but you will never hear anyone really from Pastor Johnson on down refer to Eastern Star Missionary Baptist Church. It's
Mm.
Eastern Star Church,
Mhm.
and that sort of not eradicating, but sort of diminishing denomination is something that is important. We are, Christians coming together. Now there, certainly there is the core, to your point, Jason, this is what we believe and so on. But part of the, I think, very intentional effort is to try to say, if we start with belief in Christ, we can figure out all the other
Mhm.
things.
I think it should be that simple. And I mean, that sounds very kumbaya,
Mhm.
especially in the complicated world where everyone's trying to leverage their own version of Christianity and all of that. But it's hard because now maybe there are some things that are good, technology and availability of information, right? And our kids are smarter than we were. We didn't know how to use our minds as well as they do. I think they're better equipped.
Yeah. Everything's so selective now. I mean, whether it's in marketing or it's in churches or politics, like you can
Yeah.
find exactly what you want to find anywhere, which makes it harder. I mean, which is kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, talking about the messaging with churches, Jason. It's so much more focused on like, how do we help the people with their real life issues in our community, more so than what used to be is like, check out our big church or look at our light show, or we got a great band, or the choir's amazing, we've got a 9,000 pipe organ, or like whatever used to be like the thing that drew people in. None of that's working anymore, and now it seems to be the thing that works. And I think we're starting to see some of this as more our church gets into helping our community, is people going like, oh, they're the church that helps me when I have a problem.
Yeah.
And when when my life, hits the fan, they're the ones that I can probably call them. They might be able to help me. And,
Yeah.
I think somehow maybe even getting back to that messaging with our kids and with our, with everybody, like, hey, like God's here for you when it hits the fan,
Right.
and we can
yeah.
build on that from there and kind of figure out the rest of it. But nobody's interested in the rest of it yet anymore. They're just, there's that like selfishness, but I don't know if that's a bad thing right now. It's just like, if we can be real honest about like, hey, we can help you with these things, and let our why just kind of do the talking there. I find that more effective. And I've got some pastor friends that are seeing some really good success just doing things like recovery churches and, food drives, things like that, where they're seeing people funnel into their church through those things. And, they're not like wealthy people that are going to come and like pay for the new organ, but they're people coming into church. And isn't that the point?
Yeah, that's it. That's a very New Testament model for how the church started and grew. We're back on Daddy Issues. Jason and Larry speaking with Joe Garrison of Moonflower Marketing. So Joe also has done a lot of clear church communications in terms of taking a brand and a communication system, if you will, of many small to mid-sized churches across the country and helping them understand how to do things better. And he's also a father of two young, amazing girls who are growing up and thriving and taking after their mom, I think it's safe to say. So kudos on the parenting and on the professionalism with what you do. I think there's so much crossover, though, because, you were a youth pastor for several years, and then you have girls who are now growing up. And, what would you do differently back then if you knew now? Or are you learning now how to put into practice what you learned as a youth minister?
And yeah, I always kind of joke that ministry and marketing is just the same thing, different outcomes. It's funny and true and sad a little bit all at the same time. It's all really, telling a story and trying to show people the outcomes of their own personal story. I've used marketing on my kids, and I've used youth ministry on my kids. I work with what's called the story brand framework, and I got my, daughter to take a shower one night using that marketing framework and just piece together a quick little message. And it was funny
Nice.
how it worked.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot as a youth pastor that I think, crosses over into the business side, like the marketing, business, stuff like that. Sure. But I think just kind of realizing then just all the different personalities that people have, first of all, but kids as well, is very helpful. And, now that I'm 10 years later and I've got, an 11 going on 12-year-old and an 8-year-old, two very different personalities. One is, my youngest is full of sunshine and yay, happy, life is good. Everything's great. Can I learn about God? That's, bring that. The other one is, I say like, she's amazing. She can change the world. She's like living with a little prosecutor. She's going to argue down to the, down to the bone, and just take every little word that you get wrong and use it against you in a court of her. So but the cool thing is, like, doing youth ministry, I had kids like that. I had kids that were, the absolute most sunshine kids you've ever met. Had a wedding a couple, months ago for one of those kids, where just like, I always say she's like Mary Tyler Moore, like, who could hold on with her smile. Like that kid could smile at you and you just be like, life's good. Then you have the other kids that are difficult, a little more personality and toughness, stubbornness. And, so that kind of definitely prepares you for what I've ended up with is I have a Mary Tyler Moore and someone who could be a detective on SVU or something.
Yeah, I got that. That fits. So Larry, what are we trying to do with our kids that we can do better? I think that to me, I always think back to that being like the unspoken kind of challenge that I internalize when we have these conversations about mental health and about education and about how we're doing as fathers. This is Daddy Issues, and we'll be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by eHarmony, the dating app to find someone you can be yourself with. Why doesn't eHarmony allow copy and paste in first messages? Because you are unique, and your conversations should reflect that. eHarmony wants you to find someone who will get you. How are you going to know who gets you if people send you the same generic conversation starters they message everyone else? Conversations that actually help you get to know each other. Imagine that. Get who gets you on eHarmony. Sign up today. What makes a life a good one? Is it the adventure you have? Or the friends you find along the way? Maybe it's pursuing your passion while striving to protect, defend, and save what you believe in every single day. So, what makes a life a good one? In the Coast Guard, we think it's all of the above and more, but you'll have to find out for yourself. Visit gocoastguard.com to learn more.
And now let's get back to daddy issues. How can we do better with this whole idea of raising kids to be spiritual and to embrace their own journey? But also don't forget, here's the right way. So, here, take this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a few things, with me, I think that the most important thing is what they observe about us and how we live out the faith. We could go through all the doctrine and what the Bible says and all that, but if they don't see us living that out, how we treat people, what we say, they see us in our very good times or very low times. And so I think one, that's crucial. Two, certainly begin with a solid foundation. This is the Bible, this is who God is, this is who Jesus is, this is why we believe what we believe, but allow them to have their own journey. I think a mistake that I made was wanting them to be carbon copies of me. And that's just that. It clearly it hasn't worked out. And again, not that their beliefs are just so radically different from mine. In many cases, they're not, but they're definitely more progressive than I am. And if you had asked me, all those years ago with my eldest, or even 10, 15 years ago with my younger ones, I was like, no, there's just no way, because we train up a child in a way that he should go. When he is old, he will not depart. And again, nothing radical. They haven't thrown up their hands at the church or anything like that, but it's definitely. And I think the third thing is they just have to know that we love them. No matter what, it is unconditional. I love you. We're not always going to agree about a whole variety of things, not even things that are faith related, just a whole variety of things, but I love you, and I think that is crucial to impart to them.
So, I think that's the key right there. If they see home and their parents is a safe place to question things and disagree with things and know that there's no consequences for doing that, I think that's huge. Not every kid has that. I think that's probably the biggest aha moment you hit there, Larry. That's a good one.
Yeah, there are degrees of conservatism where it is okay to question and some where it's not. So I was raised in a conservative denomination, very much so. And I mean, I definitely was not encouraged along the line of questioning things, but I was not ostracized. The way that it became my own is through the deconstruction, if you will, and of the reconstruction. Okay, now I know what this is that was presented to me and was prescribed to me. But now I took the time because I was modeled with the value that it should have. Okay, so this is not my parents, not my parents or grandparents' version of it. It's mine, and I call it mine. And that's what we want it to be with them, because if it's something whimsical, like what sports team do you like? Well, I like this team. Is it just because that's what your dad liked? Or do you like it because of it becomes such an important thing to really make your own. I think we've hit on it though, because that's given the freedom. Give the freedom to question, and then always be there and always be modeling what you say you believe and what you stand for. That will speak volumes. I think we're doing okay. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I'd like to think so.
Most days.
Yeah.
So always be, modeling is like, in business, it's always be selling, but I feel like in life, it's always be modeling, ABM.
ABM.
And we do better than that some days than others. I think of actually a couple of days this week where my model was broken.
Yeah, always be staying alive. That's it. Joe, you remember Chris Landon? You know who she is?
Oh yeah.
So Chris Landon, Larry, was the founder and original head of the nursery school that's affiliated with our church.
Oh, wow.
And,
okay. All right.
She is now retired, but she espoused conscious discipline model of like how to always be positive in your raising your children. And so we went through that, Joe, when Anthony was little. And did your girls go to Cummins too, or no? Yeah, I figured they did. So one thing I'll always remember that Chris Landon said, she had these optional classes for parents to come to. And at that point you're like, yeah, I'll take anything I can get, any wisdom you can drop. And she's like, give yourself credit. If you do the right thing half of the time plus one. Okay. You're doing okay. So it was an encouragement thought, but for her to say, I know you think that you are not doing it right because you remember the things that are not perfect, that, oh no, it was messy. This thing happened. Could have done this better. She's like, half the time plus one. If that's what you feel like you're doing okay. Yeah. Because the intent is always there. So that's a pearl of wisdom from Chris Landon. So, well, gentlemen, I think we've done a pretty good job of chasing out cobwebs, and we made a little sense. I hope it's been encouraging.
Indeed.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate you having me on. It's a good conversation.
Yeah.
Definitely. And great meeting you, Joe. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, Larry.
Joe, how can people get in touch with you and utilize your services? I'll let you get a free plug here.
Yeah, moonflowermarketing.com. Branding, messaging, get your clarity out.
So, Larry, how are things going at Fathers and Families?
It's going well. We just keep expanding, serving more and more men. It's a place. It's a little problematic. We've outgrown our building literally and figuratively because it's not a family-friendly building. But yeah, it's going very, very well. Just the word is getting out more, increasing the number of men we're serving. Some challenges, obviously, with our clientele around homelessness, hunger, those kinds of things. But once they go through the one of the programs, they're on their path to, most importantly, a better relationship with their children, their children's mother, and then certainly to a job or career with a what I call a family sustaining wage. And so we're excited about all that.
Yeah, a family sustaining wage. Great. Well, I'm so glad we got to connect. Two good friends. I'm glad I know you. Larry, any closing thoughts?
Just, love your kids, give them, the basic tools and, beliefs, but, let them be who God created them to be. Demonstrate what you want them to be. All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Daddy Issues. Be sure to connect with us on social media. Feel free to email us, dads@thedaddyissuespodcast.com. Daddy Issues is a podcast from the Fathers and Family Center of Indianapolis, Indiana. To learn more about the programs of Fathers and Family Center, visit fathersandfamilycenter.org.